Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, councillors and officers, those who are viewing us online. Welcome to East Gippsland Shire Council's council meeting today of the 7th of February 2023. Goodness me, the summer is marching along and so is the year. East Gippsland Shire Council live streams, records and publishes its meetings via webcasting. These recordings are available for viewing by the public. During the meeting, any member of the public who are addressing the council will have their image and comments recorded. No other person has the right to record council meetings unless approval has been granted by the chair, and that's me up here. In line with the Local Government Act 2020, councillors are able to attend council meetings electronically or in person, and the meeting will be open to the public via live streaming. Members of the public are invited to view the live streamed council meeting by following the link on the council's website or Facebook page. If council encounters technical difficulties with the live streaming during the meeting, we will adjourn until the issue is resolved. If the technical issues can't be resolved, the meeting may be postponed until a later time or date. I'd like to acknowledge, and East Gippsland Shire Council would like to acknowledge, the Gunai, Kurnai, Monera and Bidawal people as the traditional custodians of the land and waters that encompass East Gippsland Shire and their enduring relationship with country. The traditional custodians have cared and nurtured East Gippsland for tens of thousands of years. Council value their living culture and practices and their right to self-determination. Council pays respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people living in East Gippsland, their elders past, present and future. And I believe, CEO, item 1.2, we don't have any apologies tonight at this stage.
That's correct, Mayor.
Sorry, Mayor, to interrupt. There's an apology from Councillor White.
Okay, Councillor White would probably need to make that known to myself or the CEO. If you could pass that on, please.
I certainly can.
Good. Thanks, Councillor Buckley. A member's attendance, councillors, can only be recorded as present at the council meeting when the member can confirm they meet all of these criteria. They can hear proceedings, they can see other members in attendance and can be seen by other members, and they can be heard to speak. So I will now confirm with each councillor, that would be Councillor Buckley and Councillor Uri, that they can see, hear and be heard by each other, and to note assurance from each that their location they are participating from is secure to ensure confidential deliberations remain confidential. Councillor Buckley, can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, Mayor.
Thank you. Can you confirm the location you're participating from is secure to ensure confidential items are dealt with in a confidential manner?
I can.
Good, thank you. Councillor Uri, good evening. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, I can, Mayor.
Great, thank you. Can you confirm that the location you're participating from is secure to ensure confidential items are dealt with in a confidential manner?
Yes, I can confirm that, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors online. Councillors and officers, are there any declarations of conflict of interest on tonight's agenda? Pardon me. Councillors, item 1.4 is a confirmation of minutes, and that the minutes of the council meeting held on 13 December 2022 be confirmed. I need someone to move that, please. Councillor Allen, seconded Councillor Van Diggle. Sorry, Councillor Uri, you're beaten to the task. Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to the motion? Councillor Van Diggle, is the motion opposed? Anybody else like to speak to the motion? Put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks, CEO. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. 1.5, councillors. The next meeting of this council will be 28th of February to be held here in the Corporate Centre, 273 Main Street, Bairnsdale at 6 p.m. 1.6, councillors. Any requests for leave of absence?
None have been received.
None. Thank you, CEO. Let's move on to item 1.7. That's our open forum, councillors. And 1.7.1, we have a petition. And that will be Mr. Cannizzaro. Are you looking after that? Terrific. Thank you. Take us on that journey.
Thank you, Mayor. And through you,
was it CEO?
We do have a request to speak to this item.
Right.
Yep, we do.
Okay. Terrific. Okay, that's Mr. Lever.
Yes, good evening.
Good evening, John. Welcome. It's Councillor Reeves here up in the Mayor's seat, the very top, if you can see the room. And the other councillors are here in the chamber, and councillors Uri and Buckley are online.
Right, you're all very clear.
Welcome. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
Thanks very much. Well, of course, we're here to discuss a petition that I was chief petitioner of against the toilet that's proposed to go in the Koala Park, which is between 12th and 10th Avenue and Raymond Island. I live on 10th Avenue on a property that would be closest to the park. And the first we heard of the proposal was when my neighbour over the back, Ben Self, who lives at 34 12th Avenue, told me about it. And I rang in and spoke to Ashley Dixon Tong, who sent out a bit of a plan about what was proposed, and we found that the toilet block was going to be built 9 metres from this lad over the back's fence, which was really horrified us. And I took a petition around along all the people that actually confronted the park in 10th Avenue, on all the houses that were inhabited, and I got a response from all of them that they were against the toilet block, apart from one house who were members of RICA, and they wished to take the matter to RICA before they commented. While we've said we don't want the toilet block to go on at all, everybody I spoke to was happy if the toilet block was put right to the very eastern end of the park, preferably behind the Koala Walk, and some have suggested that we put an eco-loo on the nature walk, which goes in an easterly direction from the Koala Walk and is well into the bushes. Everybody would be happy about that. And it would solve another problem that Ashley Dixon Tong told me about. She said they were having trouble getting a fall from the proposed site to the interceptor pit, which is on the boundary, hard against the boundary at the intersection of our property and the property behind us. But there are ways of overcoming that too. I've put in a few, I'm an engineer who's had a bit to do with these systems, and I've installed systems with submersible pumps that can pump up. You can put the toilet anywhere, and using a pumping system powered by a solar cell remotely anywhere in the park, a simple system could be built like that. But as I say, you know, if the toilet was re-sited, out of sight and out of smelling range, we'd be happy.
Mr. Lever, thanks very much for that. Your comments are noted here in the chamber. And we do have your petition in front of us now, and that report will be presented to us by Mr. Cannizzaro, Manager Business Excellence.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
very
And
much.
through you. Councillors, before you is a report regarding a petition submitted by John Lever from Raymond Island, lodged on the 30th of January 2023, objecting to the new toilet block development at the Koala Park, Raymond Island. The petition has been received via electronic means and states, we, the undersigned residents of Raymond Island, object to the plan to build a public toilet within the Koala Park at Raymond Island. So, councillors, the petition has been received and accepted and is presented to you tonight. The recommendation is provided at page 8 of your agenda, to receive the petition lodged by John Lever, objecting to the plan to build a toilet block within the Koala Park at Raymond Island, and also the council refers the petition to Chief Executive Officer for a report to a future council meeting, and that council notes that council officers will write to the head petitioner advising them of these actions. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Cannizzaro, thank you, and councillors will note there is a spelling mistake in that recommendation. Mr. Lever, we are going to correct that in the documentation, so our humble apologies. You became a weaver rather than a lever on this occasion, so I'm sorry about that. Councillors, are there any questions? Is that enough thinking time? Thank you, councillors. In which case, councillors, there is a recommendation. Do I have a motion? Thanks, Councillor Crook. I have a seconder. Councillor Van Diggle. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Briefly, just to thank Mr. Lever for bringing this to our attention and collating the petition. It's important that we hear these things from the community.
Thank you, Councillor Van Diggle. Councillors, the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Thank you, councillors, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Mr. Lever, we have your petition and thank you for that. Good evening. Thank you. You are able to leave now, should you so want. Thank you. Item 1.7.2, questions of council. And Mr. Miller has provided a question, and CEO, you're going to read that for Mr. Miller.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So Mr. Miller of Metung has asked me to read this on his behalf. His question, and then some context, goes as follows. Could a walking path be provided to those walkers that walk along Metung Road between Stirling Road and Chinaman's Creek? This section is very dangerous as you have to walk on the right-hand shoulder of the road where the traffic is travelling at 80 kilometres an hour. Some parts are so narrow that you actually walk on the white lines. This was highlighted during the Christmas holidays when many tourists were walking down Metung Road in unsafe conditions. This path would be a good continuation of the boardwalk at Chinaman's Creek / Rocherville Road. And I believe that Ms Weigel may have a response to this question. Thank you.
Ms Weigel, thank you very much.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question. If I can just start with some broad comments, which is that Council receives a large number of requests for new footpaths each year, right across East Gippsland, and with limitations on budgets, these must be prioritised. Prioritisation is given to high-traffic urban areas and direct routes between essential services such as schools. Having said that, the road section referred to by Mr Miller in his question is the responsibility of the Victorian Department of Transport and Planning, not Council. Our preliminary review of the road alignment and the topography suggests that it would be very difficult to place a footpath in this section of road, given the inability to provide separation between any future footpath and the road itself, which would be a requirement of the Department of Transport and Planning. This advice, I understand, has previously been provided to members of the Metung community, but we're happy to investigate again and take up with the department. Given that the speed limit in this area is 80 kilometres per hour, coupled with the lack of a wide road shoulder, we would really encourage walkers to utilise other routes if at all possible. Thank you.
Ms Weigel, thank you. Councillor, is there any further questions of this matter? Thanks very much. Councillor Buckley.
Thanks, Ms Wiggle. I'm pretty familiar with that area. That used to be the old hot springs down at the bottom of that section there, and it is quite a dangerous area, and I understand that there's not really any other alternative routes to walk. It'd be unless you went the long way around. So is there anything else that could be done to be able to provide community safety in that area?
As I've said, we'll raise it with the department because it's really about the design of the road itself and the limitations of that. There's a very steep batter, and as Mr Miller has said in his question, there's really no road shoulder. So it would mean a lot of very expensive earthworks to do any improvements to that area, which would be the responsibility of the department. So we will raise it with them again, but that's why we would encourage walkers to take the long walk or, consider coming down to the new car park area that we've installed near the new section of the boardwalk and actually start their walk from there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks for that response, and thanks, Mr Miller, for the question. I see Mr Hoxley's here.
So we do
but,
have...
Yes.
Sorry, Mayor. We do have another person, but they will speak prior to the item at 5.1.1.
Right, so Richard will do that. Okay, hold tight. Enjoy the journey. Councillors, we're on to item 1.8, and there is an item to be tabled, and that is all that needs to be done at this stage is to table that item, CEO.
It is, Mayor. I have previously read out the item there, but I think it is pretty clearly articulated there at 1.8. So happy to leave it at that.
Councillors. Item 2, notices of motion. I see none. Deferred business, none. Councillors and delegates' reports. We're on our way. Councillor Greeson, do you have a report you'd like to share?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, thank you. I've been to a few things since the last meeting in December, so I'll just go through some of them. Later in December, I went to the Bairnsdale Rowing Club at the invitation of Ivan Knight to talk about the boat launching landing. It was underwater at the time and covered with debris because of the floods, and it was slippery. And there'd already been a number of falls with children attempting to launch their boats, and was clearly quite unsafe. Ivan told me that this site's one of the best in Victoria for rowing, as the Mitchell River is wide and straight for 1 kilometre. Also, there are not a lot of motorboats using it when the club uses it. So the council did respond to his concerns about this and stated that further investigations required to assess if a floating dock would be effective during times of flood and high water flow and debris, and so council's looking at options. I went to the fireworks at Paynesville, which were, as usual, just absolutely wonderful, never failed to inspire delight. New Year's Day, I went to the Iceworks market on Carpenter Street and Lakes Entrance. I'm so impressed with the energy and creativity and enthusiasm of the people there associated with Iceworks and Float. They keep building and developing and creating new events and activities. And this particular market's every Sunday morning for the next couple of months, I think. I was invited to participate in Gippsland Forest Management Planning workshops this January, which is part of a comprehensive package of work by DECA, previously DELP, which is now the Department of Energy, Environment and Climate Action, to develop the Victorian Forest Management Plan for the next decade. They're very well run events, and DECA has 12 months to complete this work. I attended the Draft Culture and Creativity Strategy Forum online, and which had a good representation from the arts and culture sector. And since then, I've spoken with a number of people about it. The story is the same from everyone. They want council to be involved and to be actively supporting, promoting and advocating for them. And of course, they want funding. And reaching for the sky would like a similar level of engagement by councils provided for sports and other outdoor physical activities. And they point out the economic drivers provided by this sector and the number of people throughout East Gippsland actively engaged. I was also absolutely delighted to attend the formal opening of the International Art Textile Biennale on the 20th of January. This is the second of these shows, created by Glenys Mann, who's the exhibition curator and Fibre Arts Australia CEO, and proudly supported by the East Gippsland Art Gallery. This exhibition had works from 35 artists from 9 countries. They were selected from 270 entries from 183 artists from 25 countries here in Bairnsdale. It's just fantastic. It's a fascinating and beautiful exhibition, and it's open till mid-March, and I really recommend that people go and have a look at these works. The top prize this year went to Josephine Jacoby, which is just wonderful, local woman. East Gippsland Shire Council Australia Day Awards, someone else can respond to that fantastic event. But just the other day I was invited by the Gippsland Agricultural Group to attend the Willandra Farms Smart Farm Power Conference and Field Day. The owners of this farm, Wilco and Sandra, found that their power bills were prohibitive and undertook an intensive review of their irrigation and farm management processes. They instituted a number of significant changes that meant their power bill dropped from $80,000 a year to $1,000 a year. They have solar panels, wind turbines, they've automated their central pivots, their energy management systems, and now they also have a hydrogen generator, and they refer to their dams as a battery for their irrigation. It's a spectacular success. Thank you.
Impressive. Yeah. Terrific. Thanks for that report. I'm happy to move across the room, and that would be Councillor Buckley, in my views, next, if you have a report.
A very brief report, thank you, Mayor. I spent a lot of time reading many important papers from councils, such as the Rural Land Use Strategy and the Municipal Public Health and Wellbeing Plan, which we'll be hearing more of. And it's the other thing that I did to engage with the community and really enjoyed was I was asked to sing for the Australia Day event in Omeo. So I pulled out my dusty guitar and went and sang a few tunes for the local people. There was it was a really nice day, and I just wanted to let people know that the Special Citizens Award went to Mr. Barry Pendergast, who he's just a wonderful fellow in the community who would do anything for anyone, and has lived his whole life up here. A very simple, high country man, and it was wonderful to be able to present him with the award and all the others that I did on the day. And that's the end of my report.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Terrific. Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mayor. I've got a brief report for this meeting as well. Councillor Greason mentioned the Council's Australia Day Awards at Newlands Arm on the 21st of January. This was such a special day. The weather was perfect, and obviously the Australia Day Awards are to celebrate and name the people in our community who do such extraordinary work, often without fanfare and celebrations. So it's always a happy occasion, and this event was beautifully organised. So I'd just like to give a shout out to our council staff who were responsible for that. It was beautifully organised. Everything went very well. Of course, we had lovely live music and the Scouts were involved, and many people from Newlands Arm to help to make it a wonderful day. So congratulations to both the nominees, because they do amazing work, and the winners in the different categories. I also wanted to highlight the International Art Textile Biennale at our own East Gippsland Art Gallery. So that is on currently, and as Councillor Greason mentioned, it finishes on the 18th of March, so there's plenty of time to go and get to see that. It's a free entry. But the calibre of the work that's on display in this exhibition, and displayed so beautifully by our own gallery, is really quite extraordinary. So I would recommend people go and see that. Obviously, we're so proud to have our illustrious local artist, Josephine Jacoby, recognised with her piece called The Huntsman and I. So that was made using spider egg cases, cotton and perspex. Amazing creativity. And again, to commend Glenys Mann, because she is the driver behind this exhibition and also the founder of Fibre Arts Australia. So after it's finished at our local gallery, it'll be travelling to 7 other galleries around Australia. So just to say how proud I am, and I'm sure we are, of our artists, and proud of our local gallery. Thank you, Mayor.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Uri. Councillor Van Diggle.
Thanks, Mayor. I also have a brief update. I took several weeks off in order to just live in the moment. I had 7 people fly over from Holland and I got married, so I definitely took some time away from council. So my only update is I attended the Disability Advisory Committee meeting yesterday, which was very short and sweet, and we went over the action plan, the draft that was developed by the disability consultant. And I thought I'd just quickly mention a few things that were on that action plan so far. So it's very much in its draft phases at the moment, but it was really interesting to see what was important to the people. And I've actually had an external meeting with the consultant as well, who sought feedback from a range of different community groups. So some of the things that they'd mentioned was utilise significant days such as International Wheelchair Day, World Down Syndrome Day, International Guide Dogs Day, etc., to educate the community on what it is to live with a disability in East Gippsland, advocate for a more collaborative approach to emergency management, provide advice to council on how they can make their events more accessible, write to Public Transport Victoria, the state government representative to advocate for better public transport, encourage council to identify and prioritise upgrades to footpath and public spaces. So the list goes on, but there's some really strategic things that we can do as a council, and as well as that the Disability Advisory Committee can work on in the next year. So I'm really excited to be part of it. for the following year, but there were some really great things that I think we can help them achieve their goals. And Councillor Crook was with me, so it might be a nice segue. You can go now.
Councillor Van Diggle, thanks for that report and congratulations.
Thank you.
Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, firstly, I'd just like to acknowledge that today is the 14th anniversary of the Black Saturday fires in 2009, when 173 people lost their lives, and over 400,000 hectares of forests and almost everything in them burnt at a severity that we hadn't previously seen. A severity so great that it drove the creation of a new fire danger rating system and a new fire weather category of catastrophic, in recognition of that devastation that the fire caused. Of course, we know this wasn't the last mega fire, with the largest fire area ever burnt in a single season only now 2 years ago. And our climate continuing to drive these and other extreme weather events as the world continues to warm due to the burning of fossil fuels. With record temperatures for the globe forecast for the next few years, this is clearly something we need to do more to prevent. So I'll just let that hang for a minute. As Councillor Van Diggle indicated, I also participated in the working group of the Disability Advisory Committee to develop an action plan for the committee and our council for the future. And look, this work really stems from the Disability Inclusion Act of 2014, which defines disability as including a long-term physical, psychological, intellectual or sensory disability that in interaction with various barriers may hinder a person's full or effective participation in the community on an equal basis with others. Now, I think it's important to recognise that this definition in itself recognises that a person's disability is not necessarily the barrier to their participation, and that rather this is it's the external physical environment and, importantly, attitudinal barriers that prevent full inclusion and participation. So this action plan really seeks to embrace a number of measures to overcome these things. And if the physical and attitudinal barriers are removed, people with disability will have the capability to contribute and participate with equality and dignity as full members of our community. So it's important work. I've also taken the time over the last couple of weeks to talk with quite a few community members about our housing and settlement strategy and our rural land use strategy, which very much seem to go hand in hand. It's been really encouraging to hear people's concerns, and I really look forward to working with them into the future to ensure that these important policies are as good as they can be and reflect our common wisdom. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Councillor Crook, thanks for that. Councillor Stowe.
Look, thank you, Mayor. The highlight of my time since our last meeting has been attending the wedding of Mrs. Councillor Kirsten. And she and Dan were married recently, and I think we'd all like to congratulate them on the wedding. The bride, as you would expect, looks stunning for the occasion, and the rain clouds held off just enough.
Good
so,
on you.
well done, Kirsten. Apart from that, I do have little to report. It's just been business as normal, and nothing extraordinary has happened to me in that time.
Great. Can you survive New Zealand? Councillor Allen.
Thank you,
Deputy
Mayor.
Mayor.
I'd start on New Year's Eve, actually, in Lakes Entrance, which was, I don't know whether it was the biggest ever, but it was certainly huge. And after the 3 years we've been through with COVID and fires and everything else, people come from far and wide just to be there for the evening. And I'd like to thank and congratulate the committee under Alison Brewer, who brought all that together. And New Year's Eve sort of reflected how Lakes Entrance has been right through until the last Sunday of January. The town's been busy, people have stayed on. It's been a really vibrant, lively place. I endorse what Jane and Mindy, their remarks about Australia Day at Newlands Arm. It was a great community day, and everyone who was nominated, in my view, were worthy winners. So I congratulate all of them, and it's great to see people in the community nominating those that get in and make the community work, and it shows that people appreciate their efforts, and most of them probably embarrassed to be recognised, but I think it was a great thing that they were. I also attended the Australia Day event for Twin Rivers Lions Club put on at Nicholson, and that was a really, really well attended day and a great atmosphere where people just come out and enjoyed the day. And on a personal note, it was great to be asked to recognise the efforts of both Trevor Clues and Marion Dawson, who have been lifetime friends, for their just unending work in the Johnsonville-Nicholson area. So that was an honour to be able to do that. And to echo the words of Councillor Stowe, congratulations, Mrs. Clark and Dan. You look beautiful on the day as usual, and it was a really, really special ceremony, and it was a privilege to be there. So congratulations. That's my report.
Deputy Mayor, thanks very much. Councillors, my quick report just reflects on the fact that it seems a blink of an eye that it was the end of last year, and I was at Orbost Secondary College for their presentation night and celebration of their awards. And in that intervening time, what a wonderful summer it was, and felt like the summers of old, normal, full of people, holidays, mostly good weather, and I hope that across the Shire everybody enjoyed themselves, and it was profitable and enjoyable. And in particular, the couple of times that I was down at Lakes Entrance, it was bustling. It was bustling, and it was just so good to see Lakes Entrance alive like it was in the past. Councillors, you mentioned the Citizenship Awards at Newlands Arm, and I just wanted a big call out to the Newlands Arm Residents and Ratepayers Association. What a beautiful day they hosted, and for the Shire staff and their work in making that happen. And of course, one has to congratulate Simon Hoff as Citizen of the Year. What an amazing person. Tilly Rose Hambling, what an amazing and wonderful young person as Young Citizen of the Year. And a big call out to the National Tree Planting Day as the event of the year. Well done to everybody who is shortlisted. We really acknowledge the work of those people. Australia Day and the great work of the Bairnsdale Classic Car Club for me here in Bairnsdale was really wonderful, a great turnout and a real celebration. But while we celebrate Australia Day, I also recognise the ongoing challenge Australia Day represents to many Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians. And I'm sure this will be an ongoing discussion in the future. We welcomed on that day also 32 new Australian citizens at a Citizenship Award, and it was, I think, the biggest one we've hosted. And well done to the staff who make these events and ceremonies really memorable for those people. It's really an important day, and it's really important how much both fun and gravitas there is around that event. And I just wanted to also acknowledge that even though those people were taking Australian citizenship, we really recognise that they don't have to renounce their original culture or national identity, and the fact that we welcome that cultural diversity in our community brings huge diversity and benefit to our community as a result. So that's a quick snapshot of what's been going on. Thank you, councillors, for your work over summer, and thank you for being here again today. Let's move on now to item, let me just navigate my way out of this, and we are on to officers' reports, and this is a planning permit application, 5.1.1 councillors, application 219/2022/P, two-lot subdivision, 29 Carpenter Street. And Mr Hoxley, you're going to talk to this before we start, I believe. That's the way we're going to do it, isn't it, CEO?
Correct.
Terrific. You know your way to the microphone and how this all works. Good to see you. Welcome back to the chamber. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to you this evening regarding the item and the proposed subdivision at 29 Carpenter Street in Lakes Entrance. I'm here this evening to speak against the officer's recommendation. We have put forward the application for a two-lot subdivision at 29 Carpenter Street. It's well within the existing settlement of the town, and whilst we often in this municipality in particular, in this region, we're posed with a number of environmental risks and challenges, and which may also be added to with climate change, we also have to accept that that's a choice that we make to live here, and equally choose to live with those risks, manage our lives accordingly and adapt to those risks as we can. Lakes Entrance is a fairly substantial community and one of the largest settlements in our municipality, and our concern is that this decision is sending the wrong message that we support Lakes Entrance, the development of it, and its continued support for its community as well as its economic development. This issue is not a new one for this council to consider. Back in 2008, the state government made some fairly radical changes in introducing some considerations to climate change and with the forecast rise in sea level, which has the potential, understandably, to impact Lakes Entrance quite substantially. But this council, with your predecessors, and I think even with the mayor on council at the time, introduced and accepted a policy for the coastal impact and erosion policy, if I get the terminology corrected, which sought to support infill development, and as far as I'm aware, that policy still stands today. Mm-hmm. It has not been revoked and it's still available on council's website. It was reviewed on a number of occasions through 2012 from its introduction to 2017. And whilst there have been some more recent changes in state policy wording under the provisions of the planning scheme, this council took that approach to address the issues of climate change and how it might support our coastal settlements and towns while also having to have regard to that risk. The decision in that policy for infill development did not seek to retreat from the township. In fact, it supports it. It supports this development, albeit in a managed way, and with appropriate mitigation measures to minimise the risk both to human life as well as to property, private and public. Now, this proposal is one where council officers, we say, on balance, have not necessarily considered all of the and come to a conclusion on balance in an appropriate manner. The grounds of refusal include that the proposal is inconsistent with planning policy framework. It's pretty broad. There's plenty of policies that support this kind of infill development, and whilst there are policies that seek to have regard to the risk to human life and private property, public property and the like, and ensure that risks are minimised to those that may be most vulnerable, but also those that might be most significant, such as emergency services and the like, doesn't seek to stop development. We can mitigate and respond to the risks and the challenges. In this instance, I put it to you that with an alternative recommendation or alternative consideration, the subdivision and subsequent development of this land can be achieved appropriately and with an appropriate balance to consideration and protection of property and human life. This is not an isolated property by any means, and there are a number of other properties, as we understand in the town, that would be impacted based on flooding based on forecasts of climate change. We are yet to, of course, experience an event that's forecast. The mapping for the land subject to inundation overlay is understood not to be current, despite the comments within the report. There are areas known to be inundated that aren't covered by the mapping. So, and current flood levels as prescribed and other work done is yet to be critiqued and peer reviewed. So with the work that needs to be done and the status of and current status of this council's policy, this recommendation seems at odds with all other past decisions made since December 2008 with the introduction of state planning policy on this matter. I therefore put it to you that with such as an increase in floor level above or construction of a future dwelling and a provision for such, that the floor level be at a level higher than the forecast flood level. Now, Council may adopt, as per its policy, the consideration of a flood level that would be 200 millimetres above forecast sea level rise to the year 2040. It could also consider, if it preferred a more conservative approach, to a finished floor level, taking into account the forecast rise in flood levels or sea levels by 800 mil to the year 2100.
You just about there, Mr Oxley?
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
In either event, development can be achieved without adverse impacts to the amenity of the area. A dwelling could be achieved within the height parameters contained within the design and development overlay, widely considered consistent with the neighbourhood character for Lakes Entrance, whereby anyone can build effectively a house to 7.5 metres and not trigger the need for a planning permit under that specific provision. The other concern that's raised is in respect to the risk
Richard,
to emergency
so
personnel.
I think we're just about right there. Time's up.
I've understood the warning. I didn't see a clock this evening, which I was looking out for. But if I might add one final comment.
One final
with your
comment.
Respect,
Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor. Lakes Entrance would be, significantly covered by emergency personnel in the event of a flood. A two-lot subdivision in this location will increase the number of dwellings is not going to impose, in our opinion, I'd suggest, a major burden on the services, emergency services that would already be present within the town. And with adequate forewarning of a major flood event, we believe that the risk to property can also be appropriately mitigated against. Thank you.
Good on you. Thank you for your contribution there. Mr McConnell.
Thank you, Mayor.
The report. Take it away. Thanks,
Mayor.
Mr Oxley. Yep.
And thank you, councillors. Before you is a report regarding the proposed two-lot subdivision of land at 29 Carpenter Street, Lakes Entrance. The land is zoned general residential and is within the land subject to inundation overlay. The officer's recommendation in this case is to issue a notice of refusal, to issue a planning permit. The key things to consider in this is that the proposal doesn't align with the planning policy framework objectives, particularly in relation to floodplain management, the protection of life and property. And those particular objectives are set out in the report for you. And in particular, this recommendation is based on the advice of the Catchment Management Authority in relation to flooding risks. So the East Gippsland Catchment Management Authority has the status of a recommending authority in this case and has advised that the proposal is likely to result in a range of risks, both to future occupants and to property. And whilst recognising there are other, as outlined by Mr Huxley, whilst there are other properties in a similar area, development of this kind will continue to increase the burden on emergency services in the event of a flooding event and increase the extent of flood damage to public and private assets associated with a number of buildings in the floodway area. So the East Gippsland CMA explanatory report provides some of the detail behind this, and in particular I draw your attention to some of the indications there about the predictions under a 1 in 100 year flood event, being that 50% of the total property would be subject to depths of up to half a metre of water cover, and in particular that lot 2, which is the new lot, is almost entirely covered by depths exceeding 0.5 metres. In addition, consideration needs to be given to the impact of sea level rise and the predictions there in terms of rise of 0.8 metres by the year 2100, which would see the flood risk increase. There are further, draw your attention to that CMA explanatory report and the details of that which are in the report that you have. One of the things I would just particularly draw your attention to is there is a typographical error in the officer's recommendation. And so the recommendation should in fact refer to planning permit application 219/2022/P. So just that, making sure that we have the correct reference there. And obviously, Martin Richardson, as the Manager of Planning, is with me tonight to help in answering any specific questions councillors may have. Thank you, Mayor.
Mr McConnell, councillors, questions? Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Mr
And then
O'Connell.
Councillor Uri.
So we've heard that under the current models, this piece of land may well be half a metre underwater in the future, but we've heard Mr Hoxley suggest that those models are out of date. Would you like to comment on, if the models were to be updated, whether it's likely that this piece of land in fact wouldn't be subject to inundation in the future, or whether it's more likely the inundation would in fact be more severe? Given what we know about current emissions profiles and what we've seen with flooding in recent times.
Councillor Crook, Mr Richardson.
Thanks, Councillor Crook, and through you, Mayor. Yes, Mr Hoxley is correct. The flood modelling that exists and defines the land subject to inundation overlay is somewhat out of date. We do have a project which is currently being funded by DELP which will update the modelling based on current flood data. I think it would be almost certain to say that when that update occurs, the scenario for flood risk will be greater, not less. And obviously the predictions in relation to sea level rise have continued to influence that. So the current modelling obviously deals with the 1% annual exceedance probability. When the modelling is then combined with current sea level rise predictions and is updated to deal with simply with the rainfall events, then I would suggest that in almost all cases it will demonstrate a higher level of risk, not a lower one.
Councillor Crook. Councillor Uri.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the answer to that previous question, which was also part of my query too. Mr Richardson, I wondered, so one of the concerns about mitigating against flood on this property is that if it was built at a level to not get wet, then there would be problems with the building itself and it wouldn't comply with neighbourhood character. It would be too high. There would be problems with overlooking and so on. Can these things also be mitigated against?
Thank you, Councillor Uri, and through you, Mayor. Look, I do accept Mr Hoxley's comment that even with a finished floor level above the nominated floor level, the building, a single-storey building, probably would not trigger the 7.5 metre planning permit trigger. Our concern with the raising of the floor level is more about the likelihood for some impacts in relation to overlooking. So as well, even if there is no planning permit trigger for the height of the building, there would still be a need for a planning permit because it's in the land subject to inundation overlay. And then what can come into play is provisions under the building regulations. So provisions in relation to overlooking and overshadowing, etc., sometimes fall under the building regulations, and the municipal building surveyor is required in some instances to issue what's called a report and consent, which is basically a kind of a reduction of requirements. So, for example, if a house is set back a little closer to the boundary than what it should be, the building surveyor can issue a report and consent and say it's okay. So we're not saying that necessarily a building developed on this lot would create amenity issues. We're saying there's the potential for that to happen. We don't like to approve subdivisions where we know it will potentially create a problem down the track, but to be frank, it's not a deal breaker. A building could be built with a finished floor level above the flood level, and it could be designed in such a way as to minimise amenity impacts.
Okay, thank you. If I could just ask also about how many other properties there might be in the Lakes Entrance area which might be similar to this. So obviously the situation with this property, it's very individual. We need to, you know, the conditions of the property and where it lies in relation to the flood level and so on. It's very specific. So is it possible to say how many other properties might be in a similar position?
Thank you, Councillor Uri, and through you, Mayor. I wouldn't hazard a guess at a number, but it's probably hundreds. It's probably hundreds. But I will provide a qualifier. So basically everything as you come around Marine Parade and you go down Road Knight Street and that area, I mean, it's all quite low lying. And of course, as we know, the frontage on the commercial area, which is not as critical because it's not residential, but pretty much all of that area, kind of just north of the Princes Highway through Lakes Entrance, is flood prone to some degree. Having said that, there are several, possibly many cases in the past where there has been a flood risk assessed because of land within the land subject to inundation overlay, and that risk has been assessed as minor. And I'll give you an example. If the flood level on a property was to be 200 mil, not 500, there are cases where we've approved development. It's the 500 mil kind of benchmark, if you like, that triggers that assessment as being as an unacceptable risk. So there are lots of properties in flood-prone areas of Lakes Entrance that can be developed for residential development, but it's the cases where, as assessed by the EGCMA, it's the cases where the land is likely to be inundated to a depth of 0.5 metre, which is the kind of tipping point, if you like. Okay. And there are, I've been speaking to the staff today, there are examples, several examples, where development of this kind has been allowed, where the 500 millimetre kind of tipping point has not been reached.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Uri. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. So it's a 1% in 100% chance, and that's based on a report from 2004. My question is, how much sea level rise has there been in Lakes Entrance to base this kind of recommendation on? And has that area that this particular building is going to be built been flooded? And if so, when?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Through you, Mayor. I can't answer how much sea level rise there has been in Lakes Entrance. There is significant data worldwide that indicates that sea level rises. The sea level is rising. There's no question about that. Specifically in Lakes Entrance, I couldn't put a figure on it. But what the risk assessment in relation to flooding is it's based on modelling, and it's based on scientific modelling, which assesses the landform and likely rainfall events and those sorts of things. And it's the best available knowledge that we have in relation to the modelled flood risk. There are always variations when a flood happens to what the model predicts. It's the same as any model, it's not 100% accurate. I do have access to some photography which indicates there is coverage of the roads in this vicinity with water. I can't say with absolute certainty that the property itself was covered, but I've seen some photography that indicates that the roads in this general vicinity were covered in the 2007 flood. But again, come back to the fact that the flood risks are modelled both on, as you mentioned, the 1 in 100 year flood event, which doesn't take account of sea level rise, that's just rainfall events. And then with the assessments that are carried out by the catchment management authorities, they add an additional level in terms of predicted sea level rise. And I will just add, because Mr Hoxley did raise the question of the Council's policy. The Council's policy was developed at a time when there was some discussion and debate about which figure to adopt. And he's correct, the policy does provide a little more leniency than what might have applied at the time. There was a great concern, and probably still is, that taking this modelling, in every case might send the wrong message, I think was the term that was used. The Council's policy actually says that in planning for and making assessments of flood risk, and particularly in relation to sea level rise, that we will adopt a 0.2 metre increase, not a 0.8. That was first adopted in 2012, and I think knowledge has moved on a little bit since then. But in that case, the policy actually doesn't impact this recommendation because this recommendation is based on flood levels, not sea level rise levels.
Thanks. Councillor Buckley, thank you. Mr Richardson, thank you. Councillors, further questions? Thanks, councillors. There is a recommendation, councillors. Is there a motion? Councillor Stowe.
Mayor, I would like to move an alternate motion.
Okay, can we see that motion then, please? Well, we said that recommendation that you are moving. By the magic of the interweb, here it will come. So I believe councillors have had an opportunity to see this motion, or this recommendation, I should say, that may become a motion. It's a motion. It is a motion. You have made it a motion.
Yes.
Just getting the wording right, councillors. Thank you. And I think I would need a seconder for that motion. Councillor Greason. Councillor Stowe, would you like to speak to this motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I would. I think it's been very well summed up by Richard, actually, but I'd just like to make a few points that there's many other houses in this area, so I don't know why we would just pick out one block and say, well, you can't build, but everyone else can stay where you are. And in the past, the length of time white people have been in Australia, there has been no flooding to these blocks. There may well have been a puddle in the backyard, but the blocks themselves have not been inundated. So there's a fair bit of room for manoeuvre there. I noted in the CMA report they talk about the danger for emergency workers getting in there if there is flooding. Well, flooding in Lakes Entrance is not like a river. It comes up through the footpath, through the drains, and it's really like a lake. So there's no flow. And if we're talking about in 80 years' time, it might come up to, I hope everyone here is old enough to remember 18 inches. That's about what we're talking about. For those who aren't, it's about that. Now, I'm tipping that most people with water, the wading pool down at Mitchell Street, I think would be about 18 inches. It'd be like wading through that. So I don't see that there's a big problem with emergency workers going in there, and they have to go in there anyway because there's all these other houses. So I think that's a little bit of a furphy, if you don't mind me saying so. The 2008 Victorian state legislation that Richard spoke about talks about infill. This is infill. And I think if we were to decline this, it sends a very bad message to any future developers that may wish to spend some money in Lakes Entrance. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Stowe. Councillor Greason. You've seconded. Would you like to speak to?
Usually I would agree with the officer's recommendations about issues like this. We've got so many places in East Gippsland that are already seriously impacted during wet seasons, let alone flooding events. For example, we've got houses on Raymond Island surrounded by water because the island's got low-lying areas and the drainage is difficult to manage. Lakes Entrance is used to dealing with this. It's happened many times at different levels. And it's only going to become worse with climate change. So I believe we are in need of a climate impact planning policy that will support consistent planning across the whole of East Gippsland that addresses development in flood-prone zones. But we don't have this, and we've also been advised that we're not alone in this, and many councils in Victoria are in the same position. So I understand that there's discussion starting about advocacy to encourage state government review and decision-making about ongoing development in places identified as at risk of flooding and other climate disasters. But as we don't have a consistent evidence-based planning policy in place that's up to date and that addresses development in floodplain areas, I'll vote for the alternate motion. This property's in a built-up area in Lakes Entrance. I'm an old resident of Carpenter Street. I know the area. There are many houses around this particular property. And I think, design of a building that's elevated to allow free flow of water underneath the building, I don't believe will cause problems with privacy and overlooking. You can always design a building to avoid that. And the other comment I'll make, without wanting to be in any way offensive to Lakes Entrance residents, is that I don't think there's any particular definable character for that area. And there are no obvious neighbourhood characteristics that are unique to that area. So I don't think the fact that it's going to be a bit elevated is really an issue. The whole of this section of Lakes Entrance is going to be underwater in the future, according to scientific evidence, and we need to be planning for this, but not on a one-at-a-time application. process. So thank you.
Councillor Greason, thank you. Councillors, is the motion opposed?
Mr Mayor, I'd just like to interject, please, and just flag that if this motion of Councillor Stowe's fails, then I would like to propose the officer's recommendation as an alternative motion.
Councillor Uri, that's noted. Thank you. Motion's opposed. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak against the motion?
Yes, I would. Councillors, we all live with the legacy of previous council decisions, for better or worse. But more importantly, we will leave our own legacy. Now, I was elected with a commitment to make evidence-based decisions, but while I acknowledge the processes here are probably far from perfect, I acknowledge too that we're faced with potentially not approving a development of a house where there are already other houses, which seems somewhat illogical. But councillors, I just urge you to think forward in your deliberations and consider that the current inundation models suggest this location will be periodically underwater in the future, under that 1% annual exceedance probability, commonly known as the 1 in 100 year flood. Half a metre doesn't sound like much, as Councillor Stowe said. I challenge you to accept that half a metre of water through these places is very significant and will place a massive burden on emergency services. It is not something to be taken lightly, as is being suggested. Councillors, there are places in our country where such flood events, a 1 in 100 year flood, has occurred 3 times in as many months. This has occurred in the last 12 months. We're living in unprecedented times, where what's happened before is not an accurate gauge of what is going to happen in the future. Councillors, approving this development against the referral authority's advice simply commits a future council and community to a life living with the legacies of our decisions. And given what we already know about sea level rise and climate change-driven extreme weather events, I urge you not to accept this alternate motion. And I hope that the people in the future look back and are glad of our decisions rather than resenting them.
Councillor Crook, thank you. Councillors, would anybody like to speak for the motion? Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Buckley, I can see you.
Looking back on past decisions, Lakes Entrance stagnated from 2008 until the last couple of years. And I believe decisions like as recommended by the officers will bring that stagnation back. People come to live in Lakes Entrance because they want to live in that town, they love the area, and they accept that from time to time they may get wet feet. But be very clear, it's not very often that it happens. In my 66 years, I think it's happened about 3, maybe 4 times during my lifetime. It is not, as you indicated, like other areas that suffer riverine flooding. The water simply comes up, either through the ground or through the draining system, gently up the streets, 2 hours before the height of the moon or the zenith of the moon, it starts flowing away. Within the whole inundation thing might last 3 or 4 hours in most places. It is not what it's painted to be. And I asked last week at briefings of Aaron from West Gippsland CMA whether 2007 was considered a 1 in 100 year flood. He said it was. I said, did you validate your models? Because there was some wildly wild predictions about the height of water in Lakes Entrance that were missed by a metre. His answer to that was, no, we haven't done that work. So I think to say that we've got to trust their models, I don't believe that we can do that. I think we've got to trust our knowledge and our experience of living a lifetime in the town. So therefore, I'll support Councillor Stroh's motion.
Councillor Allen, thank you. Councillors, anybody else like to speak against the motion? Anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Buckley, go ahead.
I'll speak for the motion today, councillors. I believe that for the reasons aforementioned in favour of this this amended motion, it's pretty clear that we're responsible for towns thriving or dying in some of the decision-making processes and policies and strategic directions that we take. And it seems to me that the empirical data that has been presented in the modelling really hasn't added up, not from what I can see. And we can go forward with creating a lot of anxiety about climate change and about the, you know, the speeches that are given quite often in our council chambers about those issues. And, you know, I respect that everyone has different views on that, but we shouldn't be needlessly, you know, creating psychological damage in societies about something that we don't have, you know, we're basing models on. We should act, I agree, for best management practices and for best management in going forward. So I'll support the motion tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Buckley. Councillors, anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Stowe, you have a right of reply.
Look, thank you, Mayor, but I think it's been well summed up by everybody, so I'll leave it to you to put it to the vote.
And I'll do just that. Councillors, I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 5. Is that correct? Those against? 3 against. The motion is carried. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, officers. Happy to move on, CEO? Great, terrific. Next item is item 5.1.2, councillors. Just navigate your way to that page on your agenda, page 54. Terrific. Mr McConnell, are you leading this one for us? Terrific, thanks so much.
So, councillors, before you... Thank you, Mayor. Before you is a report that recommends the approval of the Charter for the Economic Development Advisory Committee and also makes recommendations regarding the appointment of members to the new committee, and the details of those are set out in the confidential attachments. As part of the development of the strategy, Council identified 2 focus groups, and so the recommended members of the focus groups were invited to express interest, and the recommendations come from that process. And subject to council's decision making, then there would also then need to be a further process proposed as a public expression of interest process to fill the remaining vacancies within that for the committee. I do note that there is some minor changes to the proposed charter that have been circulated to councillors to reflect a couple of matters that were raised earlier today, particularly in relation to the number of council representatives on the committee and also in relation to the provisions for quorum of the committee. And so I just, in terms of the officer's recommendation, the recommendation 2 really is to reflect that revised attachment 1 of the proposed amended charter. So with that, councillors, you have the recommendation in front of you, and I'm happy to take any questions.
We do. Thank you for that summary there, Mr McConnell. Councillors, are there questions? Question?
No, not a question.
Yeah, take Councillor Van Diggle. Do you have a question? No. Councillor Stowe.
Look, I don't have a question, but I'd like to move a motion that we defer this for the time being.
Thank you, Councillor Stowe. Do we have a seconder for the deferral of this recommendation? The motion would be a deferral. Seconder? you like to speak to the motion there, Councillor Stowe?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Look, the staff have put a lot of work into this and it's been ongoing for quite some time and we'd all like to see it resolved. But I don't think we're quite at that stage yet. And I think there's a few little odds and sods we need to tidy up and I think it's better to bring it back to the council group when those items have been tidied up.
Thank you. Councillor Allen?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I think there's, as Councillor Stowe said, there's been 2 years of great work gone into it, and for the sake of another couple of weeks or whatever it is, I think we're better to just take a step back and get it right.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, the motion opposed? Councillor Uri, would you like to speak against the motion?
Yes, I think we've been working on this strategy for a very long time. I think to defer it again at this particular point, I think is unnecessary, and I think we can go ahead. But I would like to propose that if this motion fails, I would like to propose a motion that we move into camera to discuss this further, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Uri, thank you for that. Let's put that to the test in the moment and see where it lands. Councillors, would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion to defer? Councillor Greason.
Oh, thank you very much. Look, just continuing from what Councillor Stowe said, I think this has been 2 years in the making. It's been a lot of time spent by the officers and everyone involved. It's important to get it right. I think the minor changes to the charter are spot on. Thank you very much for that. But I think that there, as Councillor Stowe said, there's a bit of tweaking that to be done that would make us all feel very comfortable with the proposal. I would just like to suggest that rather than defer it for a few weeks, that we actually specify that and that we defer it until the next meeting. Thank you.
Let's change the substance of the motion. Do we need to put a date on the deferral?
If it's any help, I'm happy to accept that as the mover of the motion.
Happy to accept a time frame on that until the next meeting?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Seconder, happy with that? A motion. Great, thank you. Stand by, councillors. We'll get something on the screen so that we can see what it actually is that we are deciding on. This is where we would have waiting music, but we don't need it. Look at that. So this is the report, which is item 5.1.2, that the report be deferred until the next council meeting of 28th February to allow councillors time to further consider the recommendations proposed. Councillor Stowe, you originally moved this. That reflects what you'd like. Councillor Allen, seconded. Thanks, councillors. Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillors, I'd just like to add, if I could, that I think that we shouldn't let perfect get in the way of good, and that it's about time we moved on this and got cracking, and I think we're ready to go. Councillors, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour of the deferral? Those against? The motion to defer that matter is carried. Thanks, councillors. Thanks for your consideration. Councillors, we happy to move on? Great. We're on to item 5.2, assets and environment. And this is capital works and major projects Q2 2022-23. Ms Weigel, it's all yours.
Thank you,
Take
Mayor.
us away. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you,
councillors.
Mayor. And as you have outlined, councillors, before you is a report entitled the Capital Works and Major Projects Report for Q2 of the current year, being the 22-23 financial year. Councillors, as you know, this is a regular quarterly report, and it's a complementary or a companion report to the financial report that Council also receives on a quarterly basis. Councillors, as you know, we have discussed the capital program many times. The salient points of this particular report that the Capital Works program currently covers 251 separate projects, of which 22 were completed during the quarter. 10 have been withdrawn or transferred, and the vast majority, being 183, are progressing. Expenditure plus commitments at the end of the quarter totalled 49 million, or 57.7% of the budget. Council received an additional $835,000 in funding during the quarter, and at the end of the quarter two, we estimated that $27.9 million would be required to be carried forward. Although it's important to note that of this, over $11 million is already committed under contract or purchase order. So really it's about the phasing of those projects. The Quick Response Fund, which is a small fund that we allocate every year, is now fully allocated as detailed in the report. And there were 4 contracts that were awarded during the quarter under CEO delegation. Also with me tonight to present this report is Morgana Tapawa, Manager of Asset Planning and Development, who is able to respond to any questions. So, Mayor, the report is presented for your consideration. Thank you.
Ms Weigel, thank you. And Mr Power, good evening. Good to see you on the screen there. Welcome. Councillors, are there any questions of our officers? It's a good report and there's lots of great information in there. Councillor Stowe?
Yes, there is. Just a question. A lot of businesses at the moment are being impacted by inflation and also by lack of staff, shortages of staff, and this is making it very difficult to achieve their goals. Are we in that position too, or immune from it?
I would love to tell you, councillors, that we were immune to this, but I'm sure, as Mr Power will attest, given that we use contractors for our program, we're subject to the same conditions. Morgana, would you like to further comment on that?
Oh, no, thank you, Fiona. And thank you, Councillor Stowe, for the question. I think generally all impacts that affect our local communities, and particularly our businesses and our contractors and consultants, are generally passed on through the management or the good practices of what it is to manage projects as a result of delivery. And yep, we all experience the same as we work through what that means for our projects.
Councillor Stowe. Councillor Buckley.
Sorry about the delay.
It's all right.
This may be a question that has to be taken on notice, but I'm just curious as to know how much of our Capital Works program is spent, or the percentage of, in remote areas.
Interesting question, thank you. And we often have a breakdown of that, don't we, Ms Weigel?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mayor. We do provide councillors with a breakdown. We provide that of the annual program, but we can take that on notice and provide councillors with a breakdown of expenditure to date, as well as the full budget for the year. But we do provide that both in the adopted budget and as part of our updates, but I can't give it to you offhand. We'll need to take that on notice. Unless Mr Power has it at the back
at your
of the
fingertips,
head.
Morgana? No.
Oh, no, thank you. But thank you, Councillor Buckley. We do actually have the percentages and the dollar value associated with the localities in the districts. And yes, as General Manager Fiona Weigel has mentioned, we'll provide that to you offline. Thank you.
Is that also provided to the public? Yes, in the budget?
That's right, in the adopted budget, yes it is.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks for the question. Councillors, Councillor Crook.
Just wondering whether we had any updates on the delivery status of the Jones Bay Southern Catchment Crook Street wetlands.
I can provide you with some updates on that.
That'd be great.
That one we have retendered. The tender submissions that we received, we didn't believe were fully compliant with the tender specifications. So we have worked with the funding bodies to make sure there's no impact on the funds that are associated with this project, so that we can retender. It's out to market at the moment, closing shortly.
Okay, great, thank you.
Councillor Crook, thanks for that. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Greason.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Oh, look, I just wanted to say it's really amazing that, and impressive with such a huge budget this year that and programs, that our budget expenditure is actually in line with our targets and timeframes. It's fantastic. But I just have a question, which is about the energy efficiency upgrades and the fact that funding of $250,000 was unsuccessful. What are the implications of not having this available for this purpose?
Thank you, Councillor. And firstly, thank you for your compliment to the team. The team works very hard to deliver the budget with the trying conditions that the Councillor Stowe has already mentioned around the trying market conditions that we're dealing with. Through you, Mayor, in terms of the energy efficiency program, we have money that we put in the budgets, which is anticipating that we will receive funding arrangements or external funding. Sometimes these funding programs don't come to fruition, or we're not eligible for them when they come to fruition, or we're unsuccessful. So that's always a little bit of a risk for us with a percentage of our projects that we won't get the funding. With these particular ones, we still have a range of energy initiatives in place and that are separately funded to this sort of program budget. So we're just about to energise our first EV chargers. We've got another 3 coming. We're just finalising our changeover of our energy efficiency street lights. So there is still a lot in the program that is delivering on energy efficiency for council and for our community. So we will continue to budget in future years so we have matching funding and look out for these sorts of grant opportunities through sustainability in Victoria and others, and also continue to budget for individual projects that we can deliver.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks, Ms Weigel. Councillor Buckley, another question?
Yes, just in regards to the projects that are not started yet, there's a lot of roads, etc., that their status is not started. What's the likely time frame that those projects will be undertaken?
Look, I'll have a go at this, but I'm sure Mr Power will have more detail. This is for Q2, so it's for the quarter ending in December. A lot of our road programs and our road renewals, especially those requiring asphalting or bitumen, happen over the summer period, so you will see a lot of that expenditure in the Q3 report. But Mr Powell may wish to add to that.
Thank you, Ms Weigel, and thank you, Councillor Buckley, for the question. And through you, Mayor, I think a fairly salient point on that is that we're undertaking condition assessments at the moment, and that information will be really critical to help us understand the prioritisation process that we undertake in relation to roads as well.
That's a good question, and it looks like Regional Roads Victoria have activated every road maintenance team across the Shire at the moment. The Princes Highway is being dug up and resurfaced everywhere. Don't know what's going on up the Great Alpine Road, but that'd be nice if they did something up there too.
No, they're working on it.
Are they? That's good. Councillor Stoke, another question.
Yes, look, I note that we have funding for $491,000 worth of emergency power project. Could you just outline the benefits of the Shire of that project, please?
Thank you, Councillor Stowe, and through you, Mayor. I know this is one that Mr Power has worked through right through from project inception, design right through inception and delivery, so I will pass over to her to answer this one.
Thank you, Ms Weigel, and through you, Mayor. Look, generally as an overview, this project is incredibly important to the community. So from an outset in terms of bushfire recovery, we worked very, very closely with communities and committees of management to upgrade their facilities, whether it be a council-owned facility or a non-council-owned facility. We worked with communities very closely to understand what their needs were in terms of building resilience capacity in their community, to respond to, engage in and be a part of the communication process that occurs when an issue or an event may occur The result of this particular project is additional funding for the generator supply. So we worked through a number of upgrades for community facilities. They stepped through an audio-visual IT upgrade so that we had communities connected. It stepped through an assessment for the bushfire attack level that I'm sure that you're all very cognizant and familiar with. It also steps through general other overviews or general other upgrades in relation to the community facilities that we had. This particular budget enables us to provide generators to communities so that when power goes down, as we know it does in our communities, they've got access to additional power.
Great. Councillor Stowe, thank you. Councillor Buckley, and then Councillor Greason.
Are we able to access the information about where those generators went? Is there information about the locations that the generators would be going to?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley, and through you, Mayor. We can certainly send that out, but I believe that the person sitting to my right can answer that, answer that question now.
Yeah, so I think the detail we can provide offline, but the other comment I was just going to make is this is another project that's entirely grant funded, and so it's one of the successful grants we've had through bushfire recovery to build the resilience of community facilities in communities that are likely to be isolated during a fire event.
This has obviously got the potential to not only make lives more bearable, but to save
Absolutely.
Certainly, having lived through the fires without generators for weeks on end, I think it's personal experience. I think this is very much needed. So thank you, Morgana.
Good. Councillor Buckley. Councillor Greason.
Thank you.
You had a question.
Yes, thank you. The holding account, is that funding held within the holding account available across the whole council, or is it just for capital grants and major projects? Capital works and major projects, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Greason, and through you, Mayor. The holding account is for capital projects, so it aligns to the bit of the budget that was adopted for capital. And look, in previous audits, that's been made very clear to councils, including ours, and through Vargo, that it's important that we make sure that the allocation for capital is kept there. If we have made savings at the end of the year, we don't carry forward the holding account, so that money can then go into consolidated revenue if they are genuine savings, or if they're grant funding, it needs to be returned to the grant body.
Thank you very much for that explanation.
Councillor Greason, thank you. Councillors, are there any further questions? Thanks for the comprehensive responses there, officers. So, councillors, there's a recommendation. Do I have a motion? Councillor Uri, Councillor Greason. Councillor Uri, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Buckley, you were tipped at the post. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
Look, thanks for those questions and comments, but I'd just like to congratulate the team as well. It's an amazing, it is a very good report, 250 odd projects, and to keep those on track requires such an amount of work. The other thing I appreciate about the report, and I know we've had a few reports like this now, I can't actually remember when it started, but to list the risks in delivering the project, which we all know about. Councillor Stowe mentioned some of them, but the risks to do with supply shortages and staff shortages of contractors and so on at the moment. To face those and to still have a report like this is quite an achievement. So congratulations.
Councillor Uri, thank you. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak?
No further comment, thank you.
Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillors, I'd just like to note, as well as the quantum, it's the diversity of projects. And when we look at not just the postcode diversity, but also the project diversity, and I think it's a real credit to the team, Ms Weigel, that you can manage that diversity of projects over so many diverse and far-flung places. And I really want to congratulate you and the team, and Morgana, your team, not just for managing it, but all those staff who are out there actually on the ground ensuring that those projects are implemented and completed, and then they're followed up over that defect period as well. And, you know, there is some conversation about that around, and with such a large group of projects and so many diverse projects, there's going to be some errors and mistakes, but we are absolutely reassured by the team that you make good those. And so really congratulate you, and it's really an amazing report. Huge amount and diversity. Councillors, let's put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thanks, CEO. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Morgana.
Thank you, everyone.
We are now moving on to 5.2.2, I believe. Is that correct? Yes. And that's on page 100, councillors, by the looks of it. 99 even. And this is contract 2023-1473, cleaning of nominated buildings. Ms Weigel, take us away.
Thank you, Mayor. And through you, councillors, the report before you is to consider awarding a contract for the cleaning of nominated buildings throughout the Shire. These are buildings, as outlined in the report, that are operated by council. The cleaning contract is for a 3-year period with the options, which would be at council's sole discretion, for 2 further extensions if we're satisfied with the performance of the contract. The contract, when it went out to tender, actually sought tenders for 5 different areas, recognising, as we've already discussed, the size and diversity of the Shire, and tenderers could nominate to or submit prices for either one or multiple areas. So when we come to the recommendation, we've just made a very small tweak to the recommendation to recognise the areas covered by the various contracts that we're recommending to you. Councillors, I have with me Thayaram, who is our Manager of Capital Works and Fleet, who is also available to answer any questions, should there be so. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr Jagatheeswaran. Welcome. Ms Weigel, thank you. Councillors, are there any questions? Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I'm just curious. I have raised this issue a few times in regards to cleaning of public toilets. Has there been any further movement on the protocols around having the data of when the cleans have just happened of the public toilets, so that the public are aware of when the toilet has last been cleaned? Really important stuff. It might be a minor detail, but I'm just wondering, we've had a few discussions on this and where we're at with that particular issue.
Thanks, Councillor Buckley. It's slightly off the contract awarding, but I'll allow the question, if not to be answered or on notice. Ms Weigel, how would you like to deal with that?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you, Councillor Buckley, I might check this one on notice because it is a different contract. The contract we're talking about tonight is not the cleaning of public toilets, it's the cleaning of our buildings. So it might be best if I take that on notice, but I do note it and know that you've requested it previously, so we'll take it on notice and get back to you.
Look, I do apologise. I just saw here it said the current outdoor cleaning and minor maintenance of public toilets. So I'm in the evaluation summary. Anyway, I will take that. It's on notice. Thank you.
Yep, no worries. If you're happy with that, so this is about the awarding of the contract, but that particular detail. Thanks, Ms Weigel. Councillors, are there any other questions? No other questions, in which case, councillors, there is a recommendation. Do I have a motion? Councillor Greason, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Greason, thank you. Would just check on the screen and make sure that that is the motion that you are intending to move. Councillor Greason, that's...
Yes, that's correct. And do you wish me to read out the...
Yep,
Yes.
and could you request the blanks be filled
Yes.
with the...
So I request the blanks are submitted by Almery Proprietary Limited ATF Velius Family Trust.
And through the magic of the screen,
and-
I'm sure that that's what will appear.
Yes.
And if you could just read the dollar amount, I think that's what
And
Mr.
for the
Cannizzaro...
contract amount of $485,159.77, exclusive of GST.
So just confirm that the details displayed are correct and accurate, and you've confirmed that.
Yes.
Councillor Buckley, can you see that on the screen as well? You've seconded that, and you're happy that that's what you're seconding?
Correct.
Terrific. Councillor Greason, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, no.
Thanks. Councillor Buckley?
I hope they do a fabulous job.
Great. Let's hope so. And they follow the schedule. Councillors, the motion opposed. Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Thanks, councillors, in which case we'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That's carried unanimously. CEO, let's move on to the next item, which is item 5.2.3, which is another contract, and that's contract 2023-1520 Club Terrace Community Facility. Ms Weigel.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, through you, Mayor. As the Mayor has outlined, this report is to consider awarding a contract for the delivery of a new community facility for Club Terrace. It is supported by a confidential tender evaluation report, which outlines how the contract has been assessed and the tender evaluation panel's recommendations. But if I may, as a way of background, we've talked earlier about some of the projects that are fire recovery projects. Councillors, this is an example of one of those sort of projects, and it really is a good news story for the Club Terrace community. It is a community that was, as we know, was fire affected, and its only community gathering space was affected by the fires. So through the work of our colleagues in the bushfire recovery area and our colleagues in bushfire recovery Victoria, or emergency recovery Victoria as are now, working with the community, we've designed a new facility, which is a resilient facility and a really important one for that community. An awarding of this contract would allow for that to be built for that community. It is funded through external bushfire recovery funding, which both council and the community are grateful for, and we believe this will be a really good outcome for that community. So, councillors, again, we have Sarah here to answer any questions of a technical nature, but there is a recommendation before you in the confidential attachment for the awarding of the contract. Thank you.
Thank you, officers. Councillors, are there any questions? I'll have a quick question. This facility is being built on the old school building site there at Club Terrace. Councillors, you might remember that. Top of the hill, opposite the shed where the fire brigade shed, or the tool library shed. Remember, that's the site, isn't it? Yep. Fantastic. Great location. Has the old building gone now? Stuart, Fiona?
I believe so. I can confirm that, but I believe it
It's not critical.
Yeah.
It's just out of interest. I remember there was a discussion about it magicking away, and there was some dangerous materials, left legacy materials in that building. Of all the buildings that should have burnt in Club Terrace, that wasn't one of them, unfortunately. Are there any further questions? It was a pretty awful old building, Councillor Crook. Are there any further questions, councillors? Councillors, there is a recommendation. Councillor Crook. Sorry, Councillor Buckley, would you like to second it? Councillor Crook jumped in. Councillor Crook, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. I'd like to recommend the motion. This is clearly a really critical piece of infrastructure in one of their more remote communities that was hit very hard by the bushfires.
Let's just check that what's on the screen is what you are proposing to move. And let's populate the blanks there, Councillor Crook. If that's all right, I'll ask Vanessa to do that, to slide this slide up, and Councillor Buckley just as seconder.
So I'll read the points.
Yes, please.
Receives and notes this report and all attachments pertaining to this report. Accepts the tender submitted by Design Co Builders Proprietary Limited for Con 2023-1520 Club Terrace Community Facility for the contract amount of $705,028.
Yep.
It's a lot of figures. Exclusive of GST. Number 3, authorises the Chief Executive Officer or delegate to finalise the terms and sign and seal the contract in the form presented. And lastly, resolves that the confidential attachment in this report and all discussions relating to the attachment remain confidential.
Councillor Crook. Councillor Buckley, you're comfortable that's what you're seconding? Great, thank you.
Yes, I am.
Councillor Crook, this time, would you want to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I would. This is an excellent facility in one of our most hard-hit communities that will facilitate their much greater resilience in the future and provide a place for them to gather and be safe. When we visited there, this is exactly what they had asked for, so it is my absolute pleasure to recommend that we deliver it.
Councillor Crook. Councillor Buckley. Councillor Buckley.
It takes a fair bit to get me out of the mountains, councillors, but when I do go fishing elsewhere, this is the place that I go. And I think Club Terrace is just a beautiful little spot. A lot of people go there to enjoy it, and this will make it more enjoyable. Social cohesion in tiny villages is so important. So I'm really happy to second this motion.
Terrific, thank you. Absolutely. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Greason, thank you.
I'd just like to read out the list of services that this project is going to facilitate and increase.
Great.
And the list is, first one on the list is training and telehealth, Red Cross services, Royal Flying Doctors services, bush nurse attendance, cultural services, for example, access to seminars to improve skills and knowledge, and full connectivity to communications and backup power with an allocated generator and Sky muster system. So it's fantastic. So thank you.
Yeah, well said and well pointed out, Councillor Greason. Thank you for that. And I'd just also like to point out, councillors, as you have mentioned when we visited there, the amount of work that small community did to get that shed up and the facilities in that shed. This is just another great adjunct and a real credit to the officers for the work you've done to seek the funding, do the design and collaborate with the community to get that outcome. So we wish everybody well with that, and I can't wait to see it up and running. Councillors, let's put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? And looks like an enthusiastic carried unanimously, CEO. Thank you, councillors. My battery is running low. Right, just a moment. There we are. Thank you. Councillors, let's look on to item 5.3.1, and that's the finance report period ending 31 December. Mr Cannizzaro, are you going to lead this first? And
I shall.
Ms Collins is here to fill in the gaps.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report titled the Finance Report for the period ending 31st December 2022, which is seeking adoption of a set of recommendations as shown on page 144 of your agenda. Some key points for you to consider tonight, councillors. The Local Government Act 2020 requires a quarterly budget report to be presented to council that details the financial performance to date, in this case 31st of December 2022, against the budget. The forecast operating surplus, councillors, is at $10.8 million compared with the adopted budget operating surplus of $40.1 million. The forecast reduction in operating surplus of about $29.3 million is primarily the result of a $12.1 million of expenditure added to the forecast result, primarily due to the grant-funded projects that were incomplete at the end of the 21-22 financial year. These projects received funding in 21-22, but the works will be completed in 22-23. There's also a forecast reduction in capital grant income of approximately $20.8 million as a result of some capital projects now being planned for completion in 23-24 financial year. Also to note that there is an increase in new and or amended operating grants of about $8.2 million, which is added to both sides of the income statement, that is both the income and expenditure side of the statement. So there's no impact to the forecast surplus result. There's also been a forecast increase in the reimbursement income for the bushfire-related and other capital projects of approximately $1.1 million also. Council's end-of-year cash position is forecast to be $24.8 million, greater than the adopted budget. This is as a result of the actual result at the 21-22 financial year not being known at that particular time of adopting the budget. Together with a $9.2 million worth of cash that will be now held at year-end for capital projects that will be due to be completed in the financial year 23-24. In addition, councillors, for you to consider, the Local Government Act 2020 requires that the second quarterly report, so the report before you, ending 31st of December 2022, must include a statement by the Chief Executive Officer as to whether a revised budget is or may be required. You will note in the content of the report that the Chief Executive Officer has declared that a revised budget will not be required for the 22-23 financial year, and you'll see that as a recommendation in the set of recommendations. Also tonight, councillors, is with me Liz Collins, Manager of Finance, to field any of your technical questions, should you have them. Thank you, Mayor. The report's presented.
Cannizzaro, thank you. Councillors. Councillor Stowe, questions?
May I ask Liz this question? I know today we've had a Reserve Bank increase of 0.25%. I would assume that that would impact positively on our position with low borrowings, and I think a fixed interest rate anyway with our borrowings. But certainly we've got significant credit funds invested, so we could expect a far greater return, giving us somewhat of a windfall over the next 6 months. Would that be a fair assessment?
Through you, Mayor, thank you, Councillor Stowe, for that question. Yes, and you'll see in the report we've actually forecast an increase in the return for those invested funds going forward with the new borrowings as they come and we take those up. There certainly may be an increase, obviously, with the interest component of those going forward, but certainly a big increase in the return for the investment of our surplus funds.
Good question, thank you. It's always nice to hear the other side of those interest rate rise stories, because the impact on...
Well, it's not everybody that has borrowed money. There's a lot of people in Australia living off the interest of their capital, and this is important to them as well as those who are borrowing money. And we're sort of in that position here as a council.
Yep, good point, well made, thank you. Councillor Uri, then Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Mayor. Liz, I think that you've made some adjustments to the reporting in this particular financial report around the cash, and that was in response to some questions that came through Audit and Risk about how come if council's cash levels are so high at the end of the year, you know, why are we still increasing rates and so on? The answer was basically that most of that cash is tied or required for other things. Would you mind commenting further on that, please, and the way the report has changed to reflect that explanation?
Thanks, Councillor Uri. It's a good question.
Yes, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Uri. Yes, so in response to being able to provide some further information on the cash and cash at year end and what commitments we have against that cash, you'll see on page 160 of the report, attachment 5317, information that details what is restricted by legislation and what is restricted in terms of council's discretionary funds. For example, the funds that we have set aside for the Raymond Island ferry replacement that's been building up over time, as well as those funds that we put into a separate reserve from the bushfire waste from 2 years ago. It then shows us what we really have available to deal with those tricky times when we get a natural disaster, if there's a call of the defined benefit superannuation scheme, and any of those other unforeseen expenses. So, yes, there is detail there setting all of that out, which is useful information for the reader of the report. Thank you.
So if I could, sorry, Mr Mayor, through you, if,
Yeah.
just looking at that report, and on my, I'm looking at the same documents as you, I think, Liz, I've got it at 160 of 167 in the council report, but I think other people might have updated papers and it might be about 166. However, given that, so unrestricted cash at the end of the year is 53.10. Is that correct? Is that where is that the new report there?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Uri. The unrestricted cash, after taking into account the reserves that we must cash fund,
yes,
less the other payments that we must have funds to cover, gives us the 31.4 million, so after our payables and other current liabilities. And then we have our internal reserves, that discretionary ones that we have the funds cash funded set aside for. So that then takes us down to the $9.9 million.
Yeah, terrific. Thank you very much.
Councillor Uri, thank you for that. Councillor Buckley.
I hope these are quickly answered questions. My first question is, have we lost any grants because of incompleted projects? Shall I go through all three questions or answer them one by one, Mayor?
One by one's fine. So,
yeah, have we lost any grants because of incompleted projects?
Through you, Mayor, thank you, Councillor Buckley. In terms of, we're referring to capital projects here, there's certainly none that I'm aware of for capital projects for grant funding where we have lost those funds at this stage. And Ms Weigel may be able to confirm that.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor, no, at this stage we have successfully been able to vary funds, our funding agreements where there is a requirement for extensions of time.
Excellent, thank you.
Good.
Can I have the reason why we weren't required to have the budget revised?
Yes, through you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Buckley. In the report, you will see there's 3 reasons for a revised budget to be declared. One was if we had to vary the rates and charges, which we don't. The second one was if we were proposing to take up borrowings that had not been included in the budget, so that didn't apply. The third one was to make a change to the budget the council considers should be the subject of community engagement. Now, to my knowledge, there has been nothing put forward where the councillors have said this is so significant it needs to be taken out to the community and look at the impact on the budget. So using those 3 criteria from the Act, there was no basis for a revised budget being required for the 22-23 year.
Thank you. That's excellent. My final question is related to attachment 7, the financial sustainability risk indicators. There's 2 high risk based on the annual forecast there. Could you just explain briefly why that is? The adjusted underlying surplus deficit and the net operating cash flow, net capital expenditure.
Once again, through you, Mayor.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. The ratios in the report and the forecast for those at year end are taken at one point in time. And as we talk to councillors and work through the budget process, because of varying factors, which are detailed in the notes to those ratios, they vary from year to year. And when we're looking at the annual budget, which is a 4-year time frame, and the 10-year financial plan, we do look at those ratios over the 4 and then the 10 years to ensure that they average the indicator level that we're seeking over that time frame. So whilst they are marked as high for this particular year, we know the reason for the underlying result was a result of advanced grant funding in the previous year, which happens all the time when we look across previous years and forward years, and we will see that that comes down to low. But these are a snapshot in time, and the same with the internal financing and the timing of that for the capital works projects. So once again, there are notes there that will explain that as to why they are, but we obviously are aiming for low. Over the longer term, they are low, which will come forward in the new budget information. Thank you, Councillor Buckley.
Thank you.
Thanks for drawing our attention to those questions there, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Crook.
Thank you, Mayor. Liz, I just have one very specific question that appears in our notes on page 156 under Summary of Amendments to Operating Grant Income as at December 31st. And it relates to item 1530, Stockman-based metals project, a sum of $35,000 of new revised budget income. I just wonder what that is. Maybe Fiona?
Somebody else may, I'm not too sure whose program that one sits in. Yeah, but there we are, Mr McConnell. Thank you.
Mr McConnell.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Crook, thanks for the question. We were successful in gaining some support from the Victorian Government through what's now DECA, was DELP, to assist in the resourcing of the review and approval of the various secondary approvals that are required for the Stockman mine. So there's a whole range of different plans, etc., that are required to be submitted to council and reviewed and approved as conditions of the approval, which is in effect embedded within the planning scheme. So that's a significant body of work, and so we sought some assistance through what was then the DELP planning support functions, and were successful in gaining this grant for about half the cost of that.
Right, so if I'm understanding correctly, that's sort of to buffer the extra burden placed on council in a planning sense by that project.
Correct. That gives us...
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Very good.
Thanks for finding that bit of information. Thanks for the response, Mr McConnell. Councillor, is there any further questions? Okay, let me just go back to the report. Thank you, councillors. So there is a recommendation there, councillors. Do I have a motion? Councillor Allen, thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Stowe, thank you. Councillor Allen, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's a pretty comprehensive report, as is evidenced by the discussion that went on. And thank you, Liz, for the detail that's in it.
Yep. Councillor Stowe, seconder, did you want to speak to the motion?
I'd like to endorse the remarks by Councillor Allen.
Thank you. Councillors, is the motion opposed? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? Thank you, councillors, in which case I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously, CEO. Thank you, councillors. Councillors, item 5.3.2 is the council meeting resolution register. Mr Cannizzaro, take us on the journey, please.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillors, before you is a report titled the Council Meeting Resolution Register, which is seeking council to note the resolution register provided in attachments 1 and 2. Key points for you to consider tonight, councillors, is for the period of 1 October 2022 through to 31 December 2022, there were 29 open council resolutions, of which 26 have been completed and 3 are in progress. There are 5 closed council resolutions, all of which were completed during that period. For the period 1 July 2022 through to 30 September 2022, there were 29 open council resolutions, of which 25 have been completed, 4 are currently in progress. Also in that period, there are 8 closed council resolutions, of which 5 have been completed and 3 are currently in progress. This report provides an update of the outstanding actions from the previous report tabled to you on the 8th of November. Councillors, tonight with me is Albert Alling, Manager Governance, who is available to assist you with any technical questions you may have. Thank you, Mayor. The report is presented.
Cannizzaro, thank you very much, Mr Cannizzaro. Councillors, are there any questions? I see none. Councillors, in which case there is a recommendation. Do we have a motion? Councillor Uri, Councillor Greason. Councillor Uri, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just very briefly to say how much I appreciate this report and the officers taking care of it. It's always interesting to see, to look back and to see what resolutions were made. And I think the pace at which the resolutions are being acted on is actually quite a good indicator of how well the staff are getting through the enormous amount of work they have. I often think about the time of the bushfires and how, people must have had so much work on their plates, and a report like this, I imagine, would probably be showing that there would be a lot more unresolved resolutions on the books. So I really appreciate seeing this, and thank you to the staff for the report.
Councillor Uri, thank you. Councillor Greason.
No, thank you. It's great to see this list. Thank you. I must admit, I thought we'd done a lot more work than this. It certainly felt like it, but this is
a lot of decision making in there.
It's very good to see. Thank you.
Thanks, councillors. Is the motion opposed, councillors? Would anybody else like to speak for or against the motion? In which case, I'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. I understand there isn't any urgent or other business, but we're moving into confidential business now, councillors, and I want someone to move that we close the meeting to the public in accordance with the provisions of section 66(2) of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider the following list of items, 7.1 and 7.2. Councillor Allen, Councillor Greason, do you want to speak to the motion? Councillor Greason, is the motion opposed, councillors? In which case I will put the motion to the vote. All those in favour? Thank you. We're closing the meeting to the public and meeting. And Ben will let me know when we're ready. Good to go. Councillors and members of the public who are watching and officers, thank you for your attendance tonight. Councillors, thank you for your decision making and your consideration. Officers, again, thank you for providing excellent reports that enable councillors to make good decisions. Those who are watching, thanks very much for being here tonight. And our next meeting is on the 28th of February. So we will see you then on the 28th of February. Thank you. I'll close the meeting.